So there's been a grim milestone today. The United States has seen over 50,000 deaths from COVID-19, and in all probability, this country will surpass the 20,000 deaths mark tomorrow at the current rate. So we're really seeing how deadly this pandemic is. No more deadly than previous pandemics, um, which were had a much higher mortality rate overall, but nevertheless, this is having its toll. And there was a report earlier that the figures in Turkey may be underestimated. So the death toll in Turkey could be a lot higher. It's very plausible. I imagine that will be the situation with a lot of countries. But for this video, I want to talk about Donald Trump and his supporters. I mean, there isn't a week goes by when there isn't something that this president comes out with that attracts attention. And not just because it's the president of the United States, but something uniquely Trumpian and astonishing. Although I have to say, Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil is definitely in a running position to compete with Donald Trump for sheer outrageousness. And there's a few other leaders out there who are definitely in that sort of gameplay as well. But the latest thing, of course, is the statement that Trump made earlier about supposedly disinfectant being injected as to being a cure for COVID-19. Now, it's become a war of words, i.e., he wasn't literally suggesting that people inject themselves with this. I watched the original speech by Donald Trump. So I wasn't just reading this off a CNN source, or I watched the video, right? I've seen the footage, and it's very clear that he was suggesting it as a speculative measure. He did say he wasn't a doctor, and he was putting this out as a sort of possible strategy. Now, he subsequently claimed that he was being sarcastic to journalists. That's a lie. It clearly wasn't sarcasm. He was being deadly serious. You know, just look at his body language, look at the tone in which he was speaking. It's obvious that he was being serious. I think the White House has seen this was even by Trumpian standards, a PR disaster. Even his own doctor, a figure named Deborah Birx, his not his doctor, but she's become sort of the face of this along with Dr. Fauci. Even she grimaced at that. Here's the thing: even if it's speculation, even if it's sort of a suggested strategy as opposed to him literally saying "do this," this is something for a cabinet room discussion or something he can talk with these medical people, but not something for a press conference, not something to be stating on television where he knows millions of people will be watching this. It's reckless. That's the best you can give Donald Trump for this statement. It's reckless. But it got me thinking about the sort of people who predictably defend this. There's other things developing, incidentally, in Georgia. They've opened up bowling alleys. They've opened up ink parlors, of all places. And I know Governor Kemp has attracted a lot of criticism for this. Even Trump has criticized him, apparently. And I know that Governor Cooper of North Carolina has expressed concerns because they're neighboring states. So inevitably, if one state opens up and the social distancing rules are greatly relaxed, that can have an impact on another state for obvious reasons. Um, but back to Trump, I think I've noticed a sort of tendency with certain Trump supporters. I mean, you get the obvious Trump supporters, the people who voted for him en masse because they felt he was going to clean up the swamp. They tend to be fitting into certain demographics. They tend to come from red states, from the Bible Belts. They tend to be very pro guns. So, in a sense, typical Republicans in many ways. But it's not that simple. We can't just dismiss it as Republicans are pro Trump and that's it. I think there's a lot of Republicans are actually uneasy about Trump, but they just kind of support him because they have to go along party lines. I do think, though, closer to the election, we'll see more Republicans maybe abandon their choice this year, quite possibly. But there's those really hardcore Trump supporters who will support him no matter what he says or does, because they genuinely are taken in by every word he says. They genuinely believe that, as they would put it, fake news media are out to get him, and he's a kind of revolutionary. Um, and it doesn't matter what anyone else says, it's all an agenda against Donald Trump. And they love the man, they think he's wonderful, they think he's the greatest president ever. The rest of the world sees it differently, but that's what they think. Okay, that's one kind of Trump supporter. They're his base. They're the people that, if he is re-elected, will get him re-elected. But then there's another group of people. Um, I would almost be tempted to call them the cautious Trump supporters. And what I mean by that is they will always have a caveat. They will always say, "Oh, I don't want to defend Trump," or "I don't usually defend Trump." But then they will go on, they'll defend him, and then they will go on to use Trumpian rhetoric. They'll say left wing media is out to smear him, and the fake news media is trying to do a hack job on him. Now, is there a bias in CNN against Donald Trump? I would say there is, certainly. There has been from the start. There is a culture wars in American media. CNN has definitely got a left wing bias. Fox News has got a right wing bias. It's interesting how they never talk about bias when it comes to Fox News, even though it also enjoys huge support. Um, and the president himself talks about limestream media. He actually uses that term. So he plays to his base. He knows what he's doing. But anyway, they have this caveat, oh, I don't want to defend Trump. And yet they do every time, no matter what he says. And they kind of put this very insincere narrative that they're not really Trump supporters and they don't want to defend him, but they're just trying to be fair. It's BS. They are Trump supporters. I believe they do ideologically support Trump, but they're kind of embarrassed by it because they know he is a PR disaster. They know that the sort of things he comes out with are so unpresidential and so reckless, but they're ideologically sympathetic to him. I'd have more respect for them if they were a bit more sincere. At least say what you want about his base, but they're sincere. They believe he's a great president. They believe he's the right man for the job. I think they're very, very misguided, but they're sincere people. If nothing else, I do believe they are sincere. I think a lot of them are prone to buying into conspiracy theories. I mean, the sort of people attacking medical personnel this week are the very same people who spoke about Sandy Hook crisis actors, and it's terrible. And many of them form Trump's base. But then you get and I run the risk of being controversial here, but you get more intelligent Trump supporters who know how the PR looks, and they do care more because they feel the need to sort of put that disclaimer, oh, I'm not a Trump supporter, except that you are. I'm not talking, by the way, about people who very occasionally will say, well, actually, Trump's right about China, or they will grudgingly kind of accept something. I mean, I've defended Trump. On a very rare occasion, I have defended Trump. But I will not make any sort of caveat about, or I will not pretend that I'm a Trump supporter. I will not go out of my way to defend him, and I will not have this knee-jerk response. That's how you can tell these closet Trump supporters. They always, always come out to defend him, no matter what the situation. They always come out to defend him. They always blame the media. Put it this way, it would be easy to dismiss this as a left-wing hack job, but I've seen right-wing commentators attack Trump today. Look at LBC. LBC is not exactly a bastion of left-wing thinking. You have James O'Brien and a couple of others there who are definitely well to the left. But I would say the pendulum's actually slightly more to the right on LBC, or at least at 50-50. And LBC people on the right have been ridiculing Donald Trump for this. So it's all very well to say, oh, well, it's predictable. The left wing media will always do that. But the audacity of these people to accuse others of being in an anti Trump cult, they're the ones who will always defend Trump no matter what he says or does. They're the people who seem incapable of criticizing him no matter what he says or does. I believe in fairness. So, on the very rare occasion Trump does get it right, for example, when he says that China covered this up, he's not wrong about that. And, taking out Baghdadi last year, not going to criticize him for that. Baghdadi was a ruthless terrorist who killed thousands of people. So I am not one of these people who think Trump is just always wrong. But I do think he's a disaster. I do think that he's achieved very little in his 3 years in office, significant. Um, and I think he's the worst president in my lifetime. And that's not an ideological biased position. It's something I've given a great deal of thought to. And I would simply say that those who routinely defend Trump, it's not good enough to say, oh, I'm not a Trump supporter. If you're always defending Trump, you're going to be seen as a Trump supporter. I'm not talking about being those who are just trying to be fair, because look at their record. They'll never criticize Trump. They'll claim that they're not Trump supporters, but they'll never criticize him. So that's not a balanced and fair position. That's a closet pro Trump position. And they should just be honest about it. As for what the president said today, even if he was not literally saying people should inject themselves with disinfectant, the very fact that he would go to a podium and even suggest it. Apparently, some of these big pharmaceuticals were actually getting calls from people asking if they should do it. And they had to distance themselves from the president's statement. Doctors have been criticizing it. So, Trump supporters, you think all the doctors are part of some big anti Trump conspiracy? Seriously, it's just, I find it troubling that these people go on every single word Trump says, and everyone else is a liar. Everyone else is part of some big conspiracy to make the president look bad. At some point, Donald Trump is responsible for his own words. And I don't buy this excuse, oh, well, he muddles his words a bit sometimes. This is the President of the United States. He is in a position of responsibility. Millions of people listen to what he says. So these people who always make excuses for Donald Trump, really, they need to seriously reflect on what they're saying. Because this man is the President of the United States.